Poplin.
Here.
Corey Crabtree. Larry Church.
Here.
Trace Connor. Chris Anson.
Here.
Dana Miller. John Kramer. Jeff Griffin.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Chris, would you lead our prayer, please?
Father in heaven, thank you for the city of Seminole and all those who call Seminole home. Thank you for all those whose efforts have made Seminole what it is today. Open our minds and hearts as we discuss tonight's issues so that we may make the best possible decisions for the city and its citizens. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
We will move on to appointments and elections. Consideration and possible action to approve the mayoral appointment of Eddie Foreman to the Seminole City Council.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Tim Poplin.
Yes.
Larry Church.
Yes.
Chris Anson.
Yes.
Dana Miller. John Kramer.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Swear him in.
Yes, please.
You don't have to stand up, you don't want to. I state your name.
I, Eddie Foreman,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office
that I will faithfully execute the office
of Seminole City Council member,
of Seminole City Council member,
as well as authority member
as well as authority member
for the Seminole Utilities Authority,
for the Seminole Utilities Authority,
Seminole Gas Authority,
the Seminole Gas Authority,
Seminole Municipal Authority,
the Seminole Municipal Authority,
the Seminole Airport Authority,
and the Seminole Airport Authority,
and will do the best of my ability
and will do the best of my ability
to preserve, protect, and defend
to preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Oklahoma,
the Constitution of the State of Oklahoma,
and the Charter of the City of Seminole, Oklahoma.
and the Charter of the City of Seminole, Oklahoma.
So help me God.
So help me God.
All right, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, with that, we will recess from the Seminole City Council meeting and move on to the Seminole Airport Authority. Roll call, please.
Chris Anson.
Here.
Trace Connor. Tim Poplin.
Here.
Eddie Foreman.
Here.
John Kramer. Larry Church.
Here.
Corey Crabtree. Dana Miller. Jeff Griffin.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Since we took care of the appointments and elections, we will move on to consideration and action of consent agenda. Roll call, please.
Chris Anson.
Yes.
Tim Poplin.
Yes.
Eddie Foreman.
Yes.
John Kramer.
Yes.
Larry Church.
Yes.
Dana Miller. Jeff Griffin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
With no items removed from the consent agenda, Sean, do we have any appearances or petitions from the audience? Or is there a sign-up sheet? Okay. With that, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. All right, we are out of the Seminole Airport Authority. We'll move on to the Seminole Gas Authority. Roll call, please.
Larry Church. Tim Poplin.
Here.
Corey Crabtree. Dana Miller. Trace Connor. John Kramer. Chris Anson. Eddie Foreman. Jeff Griffin.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Consideration and action of consent agenda. Roll call, please.
Larry Church.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Tim Poplin.
Yes.
Dana Miller. John Kramer.
Yes.
Chris Anson.
Yes.
Eddie Foreman.
Yes.
Jeff Griffin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
With no items removed from the consent agenda and no appearances or petitions from the audience, I would entertain a motion for adjournment. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. All right, we are out of the Seminole Gas Authority and move on to the Seminole Municipal Authority. Roll call, please.
Corey Crabtree, Eddie Foreman,
Here.
Tim Poplin,
Here.
Dana Miller, Larry Church, Chris Hansen, John Kramer, Trace Connor, Jeff Griffin.
Here.
We have a quorum.
With appointments and elections already taken care of, we'll move on to consideration and action of consent agenda.
So moved.
Roll call, please.
Eddie Foreman,
Yes.
Tim Poplin,
Yes.
Dana Miller, Larry Church, Chris Hansen,
Yes.
John Kramer, Jeff Griffin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
With no items removed from the consent agenda and no appearances or petitions from the audience, I would again entertain a motion for adjournment. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, like sign. Okay, we are out of that meeting. We'll move on to the regular meeting of the Seminole City Council. Roll call, please.
Tim Poplin,
Here.
Larry Church, Trace Connor, Corey Crabtree, Chris Hansen, Eddie Foreman,
Here.
Dana Miller, John Kramer, Jeff Griffin.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Move on to consideration and action of consent agenda.
So moved.
Roll call, please.
Tim Poplin,
Yes.
Larry Church, Chris Hansen,
Yes.
Eddie Foreman,
Yes.
Dana Miller, John Kramer. Motion passes.
Excuse me one second. With no items removed from the consent agenda, do we have any appearances or petitions from the audience for the Seminole City Council? Okay, with none listed, we will move on to approvals and acceptances. Bids, item 1, consideration and possible action to approve the state bid price of $16,273.95 for model 725 DT Grasshopper mower from Mike's Lawn Equipment in Hera, Oklahoma for the cemetery, a budgeted capital improvement project for fiscal year 2022-23. Roll call, please.
Tim Poplin,
Yes.
Larry Church, Chris Hansen,
Yes.
Eddie Foreman,
Yes.
Dana Miller, John Kramer. Motion passes.
Item 2, consideration and possible action to approve the state bid price of $26,655.46 for a model L3302 HST Kubota tractor from Great Plains Kubota in Shawnee, Oklahoma for the cemetery, a budgeted capital improvement project for fiscal year 2022-23.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Tim Poplin,
Yes.
Larry Church, Chris Hansen,
Yes.
Eddie Foreman,
Yes.
Dana Miller, John Kramer. Motion passes.
Item 3, consideration and possible action to approve the state bid price of $19,700 for an ABS-800 brine system from Industrial Truck Equipment in Oklahoma City for the Streets Department, a budgeted capital improvement project for fiscal year 2022-23. Roll call, please.
Tim Poplin.
Yes.
Larry Church, Chris Hansen,
Yes.
Eddie Foreman,
Yes.
Dana Miller, John Kramer. Motion passes.
Item 4, consideration and possible action to approve the state bid price of $8,333.62 for a demo anti-icer base unit from Industrial Truck Equipment in Oklahoma City for the Streets Department, a budgeted capital improvement project for fiscal year 2022-23.
Move approval.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Tim Poplin.
Yes.
Larry Church, Chris Hansen,
Yes.
Eddie Foreman,
Yes.
Dana Miller, John Kramer. Motion passes.
Item 4A, consideration and possible action to approve the state bid price from Bill Knight Ford in Tulsa, Oklahoma of $35,483 for a 2022 Ford F-150 4x4 truck for the Streets Department, a fiscal year 2022-23 budgeted capital improvement project. Roll call, please.
Tim Poplin,
Yes.
Larry Church, Chris Anson,
Yes.
Eddie Foreman, Dana Miller, John Kramer. Motion passes.
4B, consideration and possible action to approve the state bid price from Great Plains Kubota in Shawnee, Oklahoma of $15,973.13 for a 2022 Kubota lawnmower for the Parks Department, a fiscal year 2022-23 budgeted capital improvement project. Roll call, please.
Tim Poplin,
Yes.
Larry Church, Chris Anson,
Yes.
Eddie Foreman,
Yes.
Dana Miller, John Kramer. Motion passes.
Moving on to resolutions, item 5, consideration and possible action to approve resolution number 2022-07, a resolution to approve participation in Jansen, Oklahoma subdivision opioid settlement agreement.
So, McAfee and Taft, Tony Puckett is the lead attorney and representing the city, as well as several other municipalities and political subdivisions in these particular lawsuits. The entire litigation has, according to Mr. Puckett, has been settled through a really just, I want to say a mediation, but it apparently has reached the point where they have felt like that they've now got their arms around an agreement that has been reduced to a writing. There are two separate lawsuits that they represented all of these political subdivisions on, and there are two resolutions before the council for consideration. Each one, the total amount of the settlement was somewhere in the neighborhood of $14 million in change. I can't give you the specific number. I don't have it up here. It's in your packet, I believe. But there is going to be, our part of it is about $38,000. And, you know, it's split among multiple municipalities and political subdivisions. It's based upon a number of factors, the way the amounts were allocated, based upon primarily population. So you're going to see, you know, Oklahoma City and some bigger areas that's going to get the lion's share of this. But that being said, we did, you know, have from the percentages that we saw, we came out, you know, as good as we were going to. Tony has recommended that we approve it. There is it was on a contingency, so we'll be up front. That's going to be 25% off of that $38,000. So we'll have to pay just like all the other municipalities will for their representation. But it's not a whole lot, but it is something, and we are receiving more than many of these other municipalities are. So that's.
Brad,
that's
is that allocated in part of the agreement? Is it have to be allocated for a certain
purpose?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good question. The binder on this thing, I'm going to tell you, is 1.5 feet thick. And you probably could pay me the whole thing to go through it. But it is designed for to go toward you know, I don't even know how to explain it. It's cannabis, not cannabis, but drug, opioid, and interdiction, treatment, things of that nature. So it's going to be related to the damages and more or less prevention. So, I mean, could it be used for equipment? Probably so, things of that nature. But it's going to there is a restriction on it that we'll probably have to use for it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I wish I could give you a more detailed answer, Mayor, but
It's okay. We'll dig into it once we get it. Any other questions? No? Okay. So we have that on the table.
Move to approve. Vote on it or what?
Yeah, we have to vote on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second.
Roll call, please, Jay.
Tim Poplin.
Yes.
Larry Church.
Yes.
Chris Hansen.
Yes.
Eddie Foreman.
Yes.
Dana Miller. John Kramer. Motion passes.
5A, consideration and possible action to approve resolution number 2022-08, a resolution to approve participation in Distributors Oklahoma Settlement Agreement.
Same thing, this is just one of the other two, one of the two.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Tim Poplin.
Yes.
Larry Church.
Yes.
Chris Hansen.
Yes.
Eddie Foreman.
Yes.
Dana Miller. John Kramer. Motion passes.
5B, consideration and possible action to approve resolution number 2022-09, a resolution requiring the city and all subcontractors to adhere to Section 3 bidding specifications and allowing low-income residents to bid on subcontracts created by the city's CDBG grant.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Tim Poplin.
Yes.
Larry Church.
Yes.
Chris Hansen.
Yes.
Eddie Foreman.
Yes.
Dana Miller. John Kramer. Motion passes.
Under ordinances, item 6, consideration and possible action to approve ordinance number 1269, an ordinance amending Title 17, Utilities, Chapter 4, Garbage System, by amending Section 14-4-8, Commercial Refuse Collection, Containers and Fees, and 17-4-9, Mobile Containers provided by city and regulations to the City of Seminole Code of Ordinance.
You want
Please,
to explain that?
if you
or-
would like
okay.
to, please.
So, I was tasked with preparing an ordinance that would prohibit the removal of any refuse container from an assigned premises, and making it a misdemeanor for doing so. That's to keep those containers.
I think that's
I'm sorry.
gonna be a little further down.
So,
This
number 8.
one is amending, well, Steve, would you like to?
Oh, the fee, these are the
Yeah,
fees,
these
I'm
are the
sorry.
fees. Mhm.
I'll leave it to you.
So we had received a fee rate when we agreed to contract with Central Disposal, and this would be updating our fee rates based on those listings.
Correct. You are correct on that. So basically, we're just amending our ordinance in order to reflect that. There is not an increase in residential fees. There's a slight increase in commercial, but as of now, it's not that big of a change from what we've had in the past.
And also the dumpster, the roll-offs.
The roll-offs,
have
yes.
increased in price as well, but that was all in the
Yes, sir.
agreement that we passed earlier.
So probably the biggest increase that we're gonna see is gonna be our downtown business areas. In the past, that fee has been set at $17 per business downtown, and that was kind of split between everybody. So with that, there were 62 300-gallon totes. Those are the large plastic ones around downtown. So for years, we had been losing roughly about $1,800 a month over who knows how long. So that's gonna be our biggest increase. You're gonna see that jump from 17 to 55 per business down on Main Street. That's still cheaper than if they were going to rent one out individually. That price is $125 a month, so they're still cheaper than what they were if they were gonna rent a 300-gallon tote individually. But we had to increase in order to recoup some of our funds, and we're still not, I mean, we're making a little bit of money, but we're not making a lot. But there's no telling how long we have been losing money as a city for our downtown area. So you guys may get phone calls on that. We've tried to talk with some of the businesses downtown. It's kind of a split, 50-50. Some are for it, some are against it. But we had to do a change. I don't know the last time that change is taken as far as a fee rate.
So did every business get a container, or are there still some that are splitting?
So our downtown area is basically shared. So you take 62 of them is what we have on I want to call it the roll right now. And those individuals in the past were getting charged $17 per month for 3 pickups a week. Now that fee has gone from $17 to $55, and they still share the 300-gallon totes. If a business downtown wants to have their own tote, 300-gallon tote, then they have the option of doing that. But it's up to them to maintain that and make sure that it's their trash going in and not somebody else's. The issue that we have downtown is our alleys are so small that it's hard to give each individual business a 300-gallon tote or their own trash can. That's the reason why the sharing system has been going on for probably 10 years plus. Probably the last 20 years, that has been a sharing system. So in order to try to reduce the cost to those businesses in that area, that's the reason why it was broke up amongst all the water meters that we have that is getting a refuge bill.
So I have one other question. Are those containers lockable?
No, sir.
Okay.
We have actually looked into that option. The only way that we can do a lockable container down in that area is a front load. But again, it comes back to our alleys being so small that there's no way to get a front load trash truck into our alley to pick those up. What we have to use are the 300-gallon totes, and it's a side dump, basically.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Well, no doubt there'll still be a morning that I didn't replace the 2 roll-ons that I usually keep downtown, but we want to show up. I didn't know we were on the sharing system. That's what was brought in.
Well, I'm not for sure that the 30 yards are supposed to be a sharing system, but we appreciate that.
I have a question. So they're still able to share, the businesses are able to share, this doesn't impact that?
Yes, ma'am.
It's just increasing the fee that they were paying collectively, right?
Yes, ma'am. We still have the same amount of the 300-gallon totes down on Main Street.
Okay.
Yep.
I have another question. Since it is related to the fees that were included when we switched over to central disposal, can we just get like an update? Is that transition complete? How did it go? Are there still some outstanding issues?
So we knew going into this, and I think city manager had explained to you guys, we had kind of talked about we were going to have a bumpy path, and we estimated that to be roughly about 30 days. We are still having issues with WCA, GFL, whichever one you want to call, coming back in and picking up the old polycarts, the old dumpsters. We're still fighting that issue. We are still finding maybe a handful of residences that may have not received a polycart, or they received a polycart and it's at the neighbor's house now, and I think that's another issue that we're going to address farther down in the council. But so far, our complaints are down tremendously from what they were previous to central disposal. Jay could probably attest to it, but our phones are not ringing off the hook anymore. We may get 1, 2, 3 calls a day, and then overall throughout the week, we may have maybe 10, compared to we were getting 25 plus a day when we were with GFL. So we're still in that transition phase. We feel like in the next 30 days, we should have everything finalized out and up and running smooth. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a question? Okay, please go ahead.
Mr. Baker, you probably said this and it went over my head. If there's, say, 3 people sharing a 300-gallon, are they sharing the $55 or each one pays $55?
Each business pays the $55.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. So we have item 6 on the table. Roll call, please.
Tim Poplin.
Yes.
Larry Church. Chris Hansen. Eddie Foreman. Dana Miller. John Kramer. Motion passes.
Item 7, consideration and possible action to approve ordinance number 1270, an ordinance amending Title IX, License and Business Regulations, Chapter 7, Miscellaneous Trades Regulated, Section 2B, Mobile Vendors, Food Trucks, to the City of Seminole Code of Ordinances. So, Steve, is it going to be you or Brad that kind of covers this?
This one's me.
Okay.
So we've been struggling with food trucks for a long time. Just to refresh your memory, back when Jack Mattingly Jr. and Stu Phillips were on the Planning Commission, they felt strongly that food trucks would be detrimental to our bricks and mortar restaurants, and that being the fact that those bricks and mortar restaurants pay property tax, which in turn supports our schools and county government, they were adamant that we restrict to a degree the ability of food trucks to operate in Seminole. I think this is an effort to us for the Planning Commission and the City Council, the city in general, to try to stay with the times a little bit. 737 has made a huge investment in Seminole. They're one of the many great companies that we have here. From time to time, they wanted to be able to have food trucks and host people from out of town, particularly their duck call contest, etc., and be able to serve food on site. They were not able to do that under our current ordinance. So Sharon and I went back and went into the drawing board and came up with this and pitched it to the Planning Commission, which in effect limits to 12 times a year the ability to use food trucks on your property. And that would be only Friday through Sunday. So it would be a weekend type event for the properties that are located on Highway 9, Milt Phillips, Boren, and Broadway. Everywhere else, food trucks are welcome anytime, all the time. So it's basically the high traffic count areas, those are limited. Some of the discussion was in effect, you know, let's pick a restaurant, just kind of, for example, let's say that Cazadores sells 450 meals on the weekend, and that's what they need to be able to meet their overhead, pay their employees and their property taxes. Well, if you park a taco truck directly across from that, how many of those 450 meals don't get purchased? So that's really what the Planning Commission struggled with, and this is what they ended up saying is fair. Be glad to take any questions.
I have a question.
Okay.
So Steve, you were talking about the tax base and all the things that the brick and mortar restaurants bring into the town. What benefit do the food trucks bring as far as tax base or any revenue to the city?
So the benefits are pretty simple. I think they pull a $350 or excuse me, $35 permit, and then I think the license for a year long. This goes for all year, even off of the main streets for $200. So they do pay sales tax. In theory, most of them do. So we do get some sales tax off of it. But
And
Thank
I
you.
believe if I'm correct, when I read that, was that they would have to be invited, and you may have mentioned it earlier, by brick and mortar business to be able to do that in those areas. They can't just go set up and do that, so.
on the streets, on those
Right.
design streets.
Right, it has to be an operational business. In other words, it has to be operating, not necessarily at the time of the, I mean, let's say H&R Block, they may be closed, they can still have an event there that has a food truck. But it can't be just a vacant lot. You can't just park on a vacant lot. Now, the caveat on that is farmers, growers, they don't fall under that. That's a state law. They're allowed to park where they are able to cut a deal with a vacant lot. They're able to park about anywhere. So,
Thank you for that, because I wasn't aware. So let's say at Chase Park, if we wanted to have an event, invite food trucks out there, since we're not a business, we wouldn't be able to invite food trucks to our parks or our events?
okay. So the only places that this applies is on, I would call it the state highways plus Broadway and Boren, which is now a city street. That's the only place this particular ordinance modification applies. Everywhere else is, as long as you pull your license and your permit, you're allowed to do it 365 days a year.
Any other questions?
Move to approve.
Roll call, please.
Tim Poplin,
Yes.
Larry Church.
Yes.
Chris Anson,
Yes.
Eddie Foreman,
Yes.
Dana Miller, John Kramer. Motion passes.
Item 8, consideration and possible action to approve ordinance number 1271, an ordinance amending section 17-4-7 of the City of Seminole Code of Ordinances for the purpose of creating a provision prohibiting the unauthorized removal or refuse containers, vesting authority to enforce and establishing a penalty. And I
Okay.
believe that should be removal of
Yeah, it should be
refuse
of.
containers.
Yeah, so basically, this is what we were talking about that kind of relates back to the ordinances that, not necessarily for fees, but for the mobile containers. And as you know, we have to locate polycarts that have been removed and, relocated to other places. It's a hassle, but it's more important now probably than ever with our new contractor. So we reviewed the ordinances and discovered we really don't have anything as far as a penalty to enforce this to make it, a crime. So you'll see that it's an ordinance that would make it unlawful to relocate or remove a mobile container or refuse container from an assigned premises without authorization. You can move it, but you need to call and let somebody know. I understand that these containers have GPS. Is it GPS?
They're chipped.
They're chipped.
So we've had, I don't know, probably dozens of situations where prior to the new contractor coming on board, a family, let's say the Saxon family had 2 polycarts. We were only paying for one, so when the new contractor came in, they set 1. Well, the family was used to having 2. Well, I probably need to take Jeff Griffin's polycart and just make it mine. And so what we've done, and this is with the help of our contractor, they're now chipped and coated, so when they drive through, they can tell that, hey, this polycart's out of line. Somebody's taken it from another resident, and now what we're trying to do is establish a fine for doing that.
Any questions?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Tim Poplin.
Yes.
Larry Church. Chris Anson. Eddie Foreman. Dana Miller. John Kramer. Motion passes.
Under current business, item 9, consideration and possible action to approve the transfer of capital improvement project funds of $45,000 for street repairs currently designated to William Boulevard to Grisso Drive for a total commitment of funds to Grisso Drive of $82,000.
Right beside Grisso Drive, or it's probably Grisso Mansion, just the street just next to the east. You trying to go north on to Brown.
It,
Grisso probably needs it worse, would be my guess, but.
Okay, so, yeah, our evaluation has been that William Boulevard is in much better shape than what Grisso is. We felt like going into the budget year that we were going to be able to do both. However, this is probably our first victim of inflation. It became abundantly clear after talking to our contractor, Silver Star, that no, you're going to have to move some money around, maybe reduce the number of projects, and this will be the first victim of that. Yes.
I live on William Boulevard, and the only part of our street that's bad is the entryway that's old concrete. The rest of it's fine, so I don't know anybody that's gonna be upset on William Boulevard.
Well, I think to a large degree, the residents wanted that fixed. They wanted to be able to continue to go 75 through that area.
no. Oh, you did motion it? Oh, okay, I didn't hear you. You weren't using your mic, so I couldn't hear you. Roll call, please, Jay.
Chris Hansen,
Yes.
Tim Poplin,
Yes.
Eddie Foreman, John Kramer, Larry Church, Dana Miller. Motion passes.
Shelley was giving me a bad look. I had to say something, you didn't do anything. Item 10, consideration and possible action to approve a Seminole Public Library fundraiser to be held at the Reynolds Center from 6 to 9 p.m. on October 22nd, 2022, as approved by the Library Board and Benefit Trust with no cost to the city.
Jay, you want to take this? Or you want me to? So this will be a mystery theater dinner, very creative concept. We're going to have professional actors coming to do a mystery dinner, and I think it's going to be a ton of fun. And if they didn't say, I think it's October 22nd. Yes, it says there. So October 22nd, make sure you buy your tickets early. It's going to be a blast. And I really want to support our librarians that have gone out of their way to do something different and offer a little quality of life venue for our citizens.
Roll call, please.
Chris Hansen,
Yes.
Tim Poplin,
Yes.
Eddie Foreman,
Yes.
John Kramer, Larry Church, Dana Miller. Motion passes.
Item 11, consideration and possible action to approve an amendment to Chapter 12, Section 12-1 of the City of Seminole's Employees Policy and Procedures Manual requiring a drug test within 12 hours of the incident when an employee sustains an injury to himself or others, or a city vehicle or equipment is involved, and requiring disciplinary action to the employee and department head for noncompliance with the 12-hour time limit.
So this has been a practice of ours, and I'll call it a past practice for quite a while. We always get our folks drug tested immediately after some sort of an accident. It just clears them, clears the air. We did have a question come up from an accident with our fire department. Where's the policy? So looking back, we realized that we've never firmed that up in a policy. So this is just a cleanup mechanism for what we already do.
Well, how do you determine marijuana content?
Great question. So as long as there's not an impaired level, impairment to their ability to operate equipment. Certainly, a prescription is the first thing that's required. You've got to have the ability to use whatever drug is in your system, and if there are certain, especially opioids, that if they're in your system and it says you're not supposed to be operating heavy equipment, and you're operating heavy equipment, we've got an issue.
Again, back to THC, what's the level that is a level of impairment? Has that been determined?
No. We leave that up to LaDonna to determine if they're sober. I'm joking, of course. That's just not something that anybody in the nation has been able to really figure out, is what does that mean? What's the level?
I understand that. That's what I thought.
I have a question. So the 12 hours, you said that's something we've always done. Is that normal practice everywhere else? Does everyone do, 24 hours or 10 days, or are we kind of within the range of what's normal accepted practice for drug testing after an accident? Yes.
I don't know. I can't answer that truthfully because I haven't surveyed everyone. I think we're certainly in the boundaries of what happens. What we don't want, there are certain drugs that go out of your system rather quickly. 24 hours is probably too long, and that's according to our drug testing company. But in terms of what do other cities do, I can't answer that.
So we would be able to back it up from an opinion from the laboratory that does drug testing. Couldn't we? Would we be able to back up 12 hours? Because I know
Yes.
the half-life of some drugs are
Yes,
pretty quick, and then some.
that's right. That's the reason for the 12 hours.
So we could have some sort of guideline from the drug testing company on that to back it up. Would that be prudent to do that?
Yes, I'm not sure I'm following. You mean to have it in the ordinance or to have it in our policy?
Have it in our policy.
So it would read something along the lines of, we will follow the recommendation of our drug testing firm, but not exceed 12 hours, or?
No, just say that, we need to do it within X amount of hours, per recommendation of our drug testing company in order to capture the proper level of drug of any kind that might impair someone's ability.
So is your concern that 12 hours may be too long of a period in some instances?
No, my concern is that we're jumping out and just saying, well, 12 hours, we're gonna make sure we capture them all, and we may not be capturing them all. But
Right.
I guess
Yeah.
in fact, that was, you're right, I wanna make sure.
I mean, I know that if I remember correctly, I am retired, so there are some things I forget, but I believe ours was as soon as possible, not to exceed a certain amount of hours, because for that reason, just to make sure that, because, it's, as you say, different drugs clear out of your system faster, so.
By state law, alcohol is, an arrest for DUI is within 2 hours with a 15-minute deprivation period. 12 hours is fairly lengthy.
Mhm.
And it depends also what type of test you're doing. They seem to be doing, as far as like the drug court and places like that, they do the swabs in the mouth now. So it's a blood test, the swabbing the mouth, drawing blood. So there's several different types. It'll probably also depend on if the person's injured, what type of test is done. So.
The other issue is, what do you do if it's at 10 o'clock at night? Not to pick on the water crew, but what if that happens, then what occurs? I mean, 12 hours, okay, gives them time for the next day, but again, you go back to the issue of,
Now, you have
is that
quantitative, qualitative.
too long?
So they know that the drug is there after 12 hours, but they don't know how much.
What level it was, mhm.
Well, if it's an on-the-job injury, are we not seeing them for treatment right away?
Yeah, I might suggest that, we have some language in there that the test would occur as soon as practicable, but not less than 12 hours. Or not more, excuse me, not more than 12 hours.
I mean, it could be a car wreck and no one gets injured. I mean, it wouldn't have to necessarily be a personal injury. It could be a car wreck that occurs.
But that's not what this says on here. It says when an employee sustains an injury to himself or others.
So
So it's not just that.
do we want to change that to include an accident?
It says, or a city vehicle or equipment.
Or a city
Yeah, or
vehicle
city vehicle or
Okay.
equipment or, yeah,
Sorry.
right, something
I
to
should
that
have read
nature.
further. I like what Brad said, as soon as possible, but no more than 12 hours.
Yeah, to go back to what you said, Mayor, it does happen frequently where a police unit will have a crash at 10 p.m. and at night, and we want them to test as soon as possible. You know, they're not, obviously, if it happens at 2:30 a.m., we may not be able to get them tested until early morning.
Right.
I don't want people to blaming our city employees for something that's not true.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we're trying to share the love by picking on different departments. So as you see, we're trying to do that and make it equal.
Just remember, it serves to exonerate the employee. I mean, so
As
it's,
far as the half-life, I think, if you have a positive test, half-life really doesn't matter. It's not how much you got in you. If you're not supposed to be taking opioids and you have a positive, you'll have that, there's no half-life. I mean, you're gonna have it till it's gone.
But that's not true of Librium or other kinds of benzodiazepines that you have a prescription for. Some of those kinds of things need to be spaced out so that you're not intoxicated while you're at work, but you need to take them, say, twice a day or once a day. You can take it in the evening and it's at a low enough level the next day. So your qualitative will be there, but quantitative won't. And I just don't want some Joe Blow of the public to be able to say, well, I know they tested negative, but, when it really wasn't a problem. But I don't know if we get around it or not. I just don't know. I was asking about the testing lab. I usually just call St. Anthony's Lab in Oklahoma City, and they tell me.
Well, I think if we had modified it to read as soon as possible, but no longer than, but they could verify on the 12 hours if that should be 6 hours or something. I mean,
I'm happy with whatever we decide here, but just throw out some caveats.
so the motion, oh, please.
Who incurs the cost of the drug test? The city or the employee? We do. And so we make it available to them and we pay for it. So that's not a barrier to that 12 hours. They can't either come up with the money or they can't find a provider to do it. We do all of that for them within that 12 hours, correct?
I know as an employer, I'm responsible for paying for it, and I think that's general practice.
So the motion would be this, but it should read as soon as possible, at this point, no longer than 12 hours, but staff to research and find what the lab we use suggests to be the maximum time limit. Is that what I'm hearing from
That
Larry?
makes me happy.
And is that doable? I mean, to pass it that way and then to,
Yeah, that already came from the lab. That,
okay, the 12 hours came
yeah,
from the lab.
what my answer that I wasn't certain about is what are the other cities doing?
Okay, okay. So if we just add as soon as possible, not longer than 12 hours, then we would be covered with that. And then it needs to be modified to also include vehicle or equipment.
It's already in there.
It's already, no, I thought you said it wasn't in there.
No, I didn't say it.
No.
He said he didn't read it far enough.
Oh, okay.
I didn't read it,
okay.
I didn't read
Oh,
it that
okay.
way. I read it that it needed to
Okay.
be an injury,
We're new
so,
here, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, all right, so it would be as soon as possible is really then the only change that would be, okay.
Mayor, I'm sorry, one more. So when we do limit it to city vehicle or equipment, does that take out any, is there more of a blanket term we can use, like maybe an incident? And I don't know if this has ever happened, but what if we're talking about maybe like a physical altercation or, you know, I don't know, someone accidentally knocks over someone, in a drunken stupor, and, you know, that person falls down and gets injured, is there, I guess I'm just asking, why are we limiting it to vehicles and equipment? And if there's no reason, could we just use a blanket term, say maybe an incident?
Well, it says to injury to himself or others, or a city vehicle, or equipment.
I think it talks about any incident where an employee sustains an injury to himself or others, or a city vehicle or equipment is involved. So I think that's both.
Body,
And,
vehicle.
and requires, and the main thing is that we're holding the employee and the supervisor accountable to make sure that they enforce this. That's the big part of it. So you can't just gloss over it, and if this happens, the supervisor's gonna be held accountable.
Thank you.
That may be anti-American, to hold the head of the department accountable. We can't hold politicians accountable. For their employees.
All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, well, we have item 11 on the table.
Move to approve. As stated by the,
No,
as my brother said,
including as soon as possible.
including
In
the
the-
city possible,
Okay.
not to exceed.
Okay. And Eddie, you seconded that? Okay. Roll call, please.
Chris Anson,
Yes.
Tim Poplin,
Yes.
Eddie Foreman, John Kramer, Larry Church,
Yes.
Dana Miller. Motion passes.
Item 12, consideration and possible action to approve closing Main Street on September 17th, 2022 for the Seminole Nation Days Parade. Roll call, please.
Chris Anson, Tim Poplin,
Yes.
Eddie Foreman, John Kramer, Larry Church,
Yes.
Dana Miller. Motion passes.
Item 13, discussion regarding Bourne and Broadway roadway and traffic issues. Our city manager is up.
Well, we're still in the learning process on Bourne and Broadway with our roundabout. I can't remember what day it was, but we had 4 of them stacked up last Thursday. So originally, when we thought we had the right solution, we were able to talk to places like Garmin. Garmin is a world-famous trucking GPS system, and we thought, you know, as long as they know that's not a truck route, we'll sign it. I think we've got, so many signs, plus flashing signs. They'll never be able to go down Bourne and Broadway. Well, what we've learned over time is that many of the truck drivers are non-English speaking. I'm not going to go out and assume they don't read English, but it's certainly, we know that roughly 70%, would you say, John, in that neighborhood are non-English speaking. So we're not getting the message across. They are not using any of the customary Magellan or Garmin navigation devices. They're using the cell phone. So if the cell phone tells them that this is the quickest route, that's the route they're taking. So I think we probably need to start the discussion of how do we get around that, and the only way that I can come up with is to add stop signs. I hate it. That was obviously the intent behind creating the roundabout in the first place, was to allow good traffic flow and try to cut down on the trucks. But until this starts recognizing that that is not the fastest route, we're going to continue to get trucks through our roundabout and doing significant damage. So more than anything, I just wanted to open that up for discussion. If you guys have a direction for me to take, I'd love to hear it. We're kind of at a loss. I know our public works folks and truthfully the police department are a little bit tired of having diesel tanks punctured and strewn all over the streets and having to call hazmat and tow trucks. And so we're open to any solutions that you might have.
So 2 comments or questions. Where would you propose the stop signs go? Just at the roundabout?
So again, I'm trying to, actually this is a discussion Brian and I had this week. The first thing we need to do is establish, okay, if I'm coming from Wewoka and I punch in, I'm going to Oklahoma City, what's the fastest way? Well, it may show us 16 minutes to go through Harvey Road and Highway 9. How many minutes do I need to trim off to be able to go down Broadway? You know, if it's, all right, I need 3 stop signs, I would propose them to be at the Betty L. Smith turn, or what used to be the Studio Walk. I would probably get another one probably at the high school where Mike Snyder intersects Bourne, and potentially the 5-way where Ideal goes into Bourne, and is it Killingsworth that goes into that as well? Those would be potential places to trim that 2 minutes off. So this is still way in the conceptual. I just want to know if this isn't even possible, we're not going to spend any more time trying to solve it.
So I guess the question is, how does the phone then get updated? Because if it's not being updated about the roundabout, will it be updated with the stop signs? I mean, I don't know. It's just a question. The other one is, and you know, should we have a sign made or signs made that is in multiple languages that say that? I mean, we have how many signs? I mean, that we might be able to do that, but I mean, you probably know what the majority of the truck drivers that have an issue, the language they speak. And if we added some signs with that language, would that help? I mean, they still have to be able to read, you know.
There's an international sign, like a truck with a circle and a flag.
Yes, there
Maybe,
is.
yeah,
Those are
yeah.
international.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Put those up, they're recognized by federal government.
My concern with adding stop signs, and I'm no expert, but it seems to me that all of the areas that have the rippling in the asphalt are caused by the trucks stopping. So if we add more stop signs, are we going to have more rippling?
Great idea.
Well, I mean, the goal was for it to show up maybe on the GPS and they would never turn that way, but I know.
Just like
Yeah.
the roundabout hasn't stopped.
All right, yeah.
What's wrong with what Larry said, the national signs, I mean,
Yeah.
you don't read it, you see a truck with a,
Well,
you don't,
yeah, and the businesses that have the deliveries have already communicated with their suppliers that it's okay to come down here. And that's what we wanted, so,
yes.
you know, that would still allow them to do it. If they know it otherwise, they're gonna go a different route. But I saw a truck stopped on Boren, and he was out of his truck talking to someone that lives in a house. I had my window down, and I heard the guy telling, well, if you go down this road, you can go all the way down to Broadway and turn back to the left and get around all this. So, you know, that guy's gonna know, well, I can go this way and around and
There's a
bypass
lot
it.
of them do that.
Yeah. So, you know, I agree. You know, if there's a common sign that is recognized all over, they should recognize that they couldn't turn there. But I am always serious too about, you know, are there 2-3 different languages that would catch 75% of the drivers? I don't know. I mean, if there is, that wouldn't be a bad investment either. But I don't know, you know, if we know. And there may be more languages than that, and we couldn't have a billboard big enough to fill it up. But I like that idea of a
Well, it's been a long time, the
international
last time I drove to Mexico. I could read the international signs there, but one way, no cars, yeah.
yeah.
I just,
Well, other than doing signs, if we start adding stop signs along that street, there are so many people upset over there about the roundabout. I would suggest that we offer some time for the people in that area to come and talk and give us their input on it.
I would have a stop sign anywhere on South Ideal, where there's no through street, where they're driving 50 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour.
yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of opposed to the stop signs. I mean, I'm not sure that was really.
I don't think that's fair to our citizens to make them, there's a lot of people drive that, and I think we're putting the burden on them where,
Not only
from the truckers.
the government, but whole,
I agree, Tim. I feel like it burdens our citizens. They're not the problem. They're not causing the problem we're trying to fix, so why burden them? I really do, literally while you were talking, I drew a picture of a truck with a line through it. Is there such a sign that exists?
Yes.
Maybe coupled with, one or two signs beneath it in Spanish or maybe any other languages that we've come across. That might help alleviate it, but I definitely am not for additional stop signs that could be a burden on our citizens.
Let me share something with you. It's a problem, regardless of how we, approach it. We have 13 signs from the junior college to 377 in Broadway, and it's so it's so prevalent that I actually keep a map in the courtroom, and I just leave it in there where everything's marked. I just continue to use it as an exhibit. But there's 13 signs there now. None of them have that. I'm curious if these are truck drivers that have gone to the school and received a CDL. Surely they know how to read these signs that say no through trucks. That's probably the first thing they see. But they do ignore it, and they're fined when they're caught.
What are the
So,
fines? for that?
I think it's $320,
Can they be
$320 a
Can they
pop.
be increased, or is that set by the state?
We go by the bond schedule, but, I haven't received, I cannot think of any repeat offenders.
And
So
do,
once they're,
Oh, I
do
know
those,
that we're having trouble with repeat offenders.
these are just usually people first go around.
well, most CDLs don't want things on their record. Do these go on their record when they get these tickets like this?
Depends. It depends. It depends on how the officers write it. We actually have two. We have a city ordinance and we have a state. ordinance or state statute that we can follow.
Well-
And it depends on if they have if they have a wreck or they're not very kind to the officer,
Well,
they're uncooperative, you
I
can
hope-
imagine which one they're gonna get.
I hope that any of them that touch the roundabout get that on their record, because there's no excuse for that.
Most of these people end up pleading, so just depends on how they're charged. But it's, again, these are usually first-time people. I don't see a lot of repeat
Well, I have a
trucks.
problem with people driving the trucks that can't read signs, but you mentioned, that's just,
Well, I would think that the word would get out quickly if they knew they would get a ticket, if they're caught getting a ticket and it goes on their record. I mean, that's,
I can tell you that they go in front of the court and they either pay or plead guilty, usually if they don't appear, they do it, with the judge at 8:30 in the morning when he does those. Usually these truckers are, they're not from here, they live other places, and they don't want to have to come back to court, so that they know what the consequence is.
Brad, is it possible that, how long has the roundabout been there now?
Over 2 years.
Is it possible that we're gonna cycle through everyone who lives there? And
No.
they know now? Or are these like new
No.
drivers?
So I'll just, I'm not picking on them necessarily, but just give you an example. 3 times a week, we have a Dollar General going through the roundabout, roughly. Not one of them is the same driver.
so the company is notifying their drivers not to go through, even though the drivers are getting fined. We can't find the company. It's a rock though. Oh, we're doing that, aren't we? All I hate is that it's creating emergency for our police, fire department. Is what it is. I don't know which is gonna be more costly, the $2 billion to resurface that thing every 5 years, or,
Well, once they get past, the trucks get past a certain point, I'm just gonna throw this out. I mean, we could go to where we don't allow vehicles over a certain height to pass through that roundabout. Now, that does hurt some citizens, but if you put them at points to where, once the trucks pass a certain point, you put that up, they're not getting past it. We also have to make sure our fire trucks can make it through, and school buses and things like that. So, that causes another problem, because I think school buses are probably about the same height as a truck. But,
I don't think they're 15 feet tall.
well, trucks are probably 13.5 maybe.
15 feet overpasses,
Mm.
and they miss it by 6 inches.
Okay. I mean, I'd like the idea of a sign, an international sign, at least to start with. I mean, that'll cost us some money, but, and then,
Try that for 6 months.
well, maybe, yeah, I mean, and then maybe check into if we can figure out how many different languages the drivers have. I don't know.
Yeah,
What they can read.
Or big the brights that we had, those solar lights on it for flashes.
Well, we have a plastic sign.
We do. 2 of them. They're huge.
I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. I think we should start out live, and eventually we could go an overpass. For the sidewalks, have some reason for a walking path over it.
what,
They can get a CDL without being able to read American? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
I'm not aware, but they are. I don't know how, Tim. I'm not that deep into what requirements are for CDL. What I can tell you is that if we put up some signs in Hindi, that it's a likely will have some impact. Eddie Foreman, help me.
No, I agree.
Well, help me with the CDL. You paid for,
CDL is harder to get here, they go across, CDL is covered by state, so they go across Red River. I don't think they read it all down there.
Well, they're Texas.
What?
They're Texas.
That's what I think.
Well, I believe it was, I don't remember if it was our chief telling us or Bryant telling us that Swift drivers go through like 24 hours of training and that's it, or less than that even maybe. And so, I mean, they're not going through hardly any training before they're able to get out on the road, so.
They don't often fail anything connected to driving. It's the pre that gets that checklist. That's what most of them fail.
Mhm.
As far as,
We're not going to revise or revamp the whole CDL process, right?
No, no.
And it's English, Tim, not American.
Spanish is American.
But I feel like if maybe the pictures and seeing how that goes. Our viewers can't do.
I think if we focus on the pictures, but I definitely, wherever the conversation goes from here, if we could just stay away from adding the extra stop signs, I would, that's what I would go for. And then also too, are we hearing anything when you, it made me think when you said someone was standing outside their home. Are we hearing from anybody in those wards that, you know, those trucks turning around, or people having a hard time getting to their homes or their destinations, or turning around in their yards or anything like, have we heard anything like that from
I'd had a
that
couple
ward?
complaints of trucks going down Ideal Street.
Yeah,
And so it's probably happening more than just that, if I've heard it a couple of times, so.
as far as trying to get the time increase that shows on on any type of route programs, and again, I would want to talk to the neighbors first, but what about reducing the speed limit? You drop that, I mean, is it 40, 45? You drop that 10 miles an hour, would that have the same effect as adding stop signs?
It's 40. It's 45 miles an hour down Bourne, and it changes to 30 on Broadway.
It's 40 down below.
40 down Bourne and 30 at Broadway.
the answer to your question is that likely would, well, obviously it's gonna take more time. I don't know if it would make up the proper amount of time. I know a lot of, I know a couple of officers that would really enjoy that, to drop it to 20 miles an hour. But I think that's getting the same level of inconvenience as a stop sign at that point.
I
And-
wouldn't
and I'm
enjoy it
afraid-
because I use it all the time.
Yeah, I'm afraid we would get more, I'm gonna call them civilian traffic stops than we would truck traffic stops.
I'm amazed he can make it through the roundabout. Now, some do by moving the rocks, but, you know, it's just amazing.
Well, you can't imagine how creative they are. There are several that get from north to south, get to the roundabout and go the opposite direction through oncoming traffic to get on Strother to
Wow.
go east. It's scary, but that's what they're doing.
Any other?
One other comment that, just to help you think about it, I want to say a couple of the trials that we've had where trucks have entered both directions, I keep hearing the defense of, well, I saw it and then I had no place to turn around. You know, once they were committed, you know, to that roadway, they could not maneuver their 18-wheeler, you know, through residential neighborhoods, get off of it to come into compliance. So maybe, and of course, then we have problems with, all right, well, we need to light up the two entrances there, you know, at First United Bank right there, so you don't turn into it, and then out at the junior college. That's DOT. So we've got signage issues we've got to deal with the DOT. And I know Bryant has put signs out coming into town to tell them no through traffic, and I think they're still out there. I haven't seen them in a while. So that's something that's been done. But they still continue to enter that roadway. And once they're entered, they're committed until they get to that roundabout. And after that, it's, tear up the roundabout, and Bryant gets upset. I understand why.
Yeah,
A lot of room to turn around.
there is.
That's what they.
Except on the south side right now, southeast corner, there's piles of dirt there, but there are plenty of rooms that a driver could
Yeah.
turn around
The-
for now.
The one I heard was, that came in from the junior college was, what was it? I didn't want to go through the nursing home parking lot. One of them said, I didn't want to turn, it was over by Richards. I can't turn my rig into a residential neighborhood. I can't maneuver it. I couldn't get off the roadway. So, anyway, just so you'll know.
Well, I have excuses to get fast.
So if we were to put signs with a no truck on it, can you put, I'm just thinking about where would they go? I mean, you don't want them, after they make the turn, it's too late then, based on their excuses on what you said. So can you put it, you'd have to put it on, and can we, that's the other question, at the intersection of Boren and Highway 9, if they're coming up to it, coming from the west, coming from the east, and coming from the north, you have to have 3 signs right there to tell them no trucks. And really you have the same issue at Broadway and 377. But if we can't put it on the state's right-of-way, do you think that's something that we would be able to do?
The state actually installed the signs, making sure that every truck driver knows the truck route is not through Bourne Boulevard.
But if we add the picture signs, as I'm calling it, would we be able to?
I don't think that'll be an issue.
Okay.
They're well aware. In fact, their comment to us was, the roundabout is the #1 complaint issue at the Department of Transportation. So I offered to give it back to them. They declined.
Yeah. We might also need then signage at Ideal Street and Highway 9 to keep trucks from going down Ideal Street. I guess at both ends, probably. It's a lot of signs, but
That's prohibited by ordinance.
yeah, but again, they don't know the ordinance, so they need a sign. Right, but trucks have gone down it, so it's an issue, so. Other comments?
This
So-
is not something that's up for a motion.
No, it's just a discussion, and I think, Steve, you kind of
Look into
get
the
her,
signage thing first.
okay. All right, well, if we're through with it, we'll move on. Okay. Remarks and inquiries of mayor and council members. Ward 1, Larry Church.
Can I run down a little quick? Well, yes, it can. It's my turn, isn't it?
Yep. it's your
Can you
turn.
hear me? Okay. I just want to run down a little history to kind of bring us up to date. And this has a lot to do with like national politics, but also for what's happening to us now. Once upon a time, communism, let's say back in the 30s, was a viable political party in the United States, and that changed when we had World War II. Fascism was popular too. Then we went to World War II. came out of that with an intense fear of communism. During World War II, when the Germans realized that the German generals realized that they were going to lose the war, they decided to repeat a maneuver they had done early in the war and try to gain as much territory in France as they could so they'd be in a better negotiating position at the end of the war, and that was called the Battle of the Bulge. And they did great until they ran out of gasoline. And that stalled them. Then the 101st and Blood and Guts went in and finished them off. But Franklin Delano Roosevelt looked at that and decided he never wanted to be the person. The United States should never be the country that runs out of oil or fuel in a battle. So he got on a warship, went to talk to the Saudis, and made an agreement with them that if we had access to their oil, we would protect the Saudi family no matter what they did. And we've kept that agreement, even to the point of what's happened recently. But during the war, the propaganda to hate communism was necessary, as it was for fascism and as it was for the Japanese. And you know what kind of consequences, and what routes we took to assure that we could do that and not cause a great turmoil here within the United States. And through cooperation, not competition, but through cooperation between business, labor, and government, our industrialization increased. We were putting out transport ships. We could build one in one day, a merchant marine transport ship. That's how good we got at it. So after the war, we had 50% of the world's money in New York banks. So we were in a great position. And the tax rate on the richest people under Eisenhower, first term, was 92%. They complained about it, so during the second 4 years, they reduced it to 91%. But the fear of communism endured, and there was a Senator McCarthy who set up the Committee on Un-American Activity in the United States Senate, and the people who were his hacks were Richard Nixon, Bobby Kennedy, and he had an attorney named Roy Cohn, who's the most vicious, meanest attorney in New York, who later, Roy Cohn, became the attorney for Donald Trump. We know what happened to Bobby Kennedy. Richard Nixon became the first president to get to resign from the White House. So under pressure, Roy Cohn taught his position was you never admit a mistake, you never apologize, and sue anyone that to the contrary. And that's what he did till he died. The Cohn family is still, that firm is still active. They traced down anyone that had to do with the Communist Party before the war, during the war, after the war, and brought them before McCarthy's committee and persecuted them to the point where they were blackballed from their professions and so forth. And the Hollywood snitch for that was Ronald Reagan, who was later hired to increase military spending, to break labor unions, and to enhance offshore banking for U.S. businesses, to the tune that we now have $20 to $30 trillion that's not in the U.S. economy, but is sitting in offshore banks. He had a Secretary of the Treasury at the same time who was calling upper management into his office and encouraging to move United States manufacturing overseas. As a consequence, we now have the biggest difference between the wealth gap, between working people and the people at the top than we've had since the robber baron days of the 1800s. And again, I'd like to say that I appreciate everything that everyone does for the city of Seminole. Y'all do a great job. Being what I am, you should be, you should be shunning me maybe, but you've been very accepting of me since I've lived in Seminole and since I've been on this council. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work that you do for the city.
All right, thank you. Ward 1, Dana Miller.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Welcome everybody to Ward 1. So a couple events that I attended in July. July 11th, I attended the Boomtown revitalization, I guess, meeting that was here in this room. Some really good discussion. I haven't heard much more since about it, but just so you all know that there is an effort. There's a group of, or a couple ladies who were leading that meeting, and sounds like they've done all of their homework and have some pretty good plans in place. So just kind of keep an eye out for any opportunities to assist them in that effort to revitalize the Boomtown playground area. On July 30th, the city organized one of the final tornado cleanup efforts, and so recruited my son and my sister. My son was actually voluntold, so we came out and cleaned up, and it really was, again, one of the. I was glad to do it because it was not only helping our city, but it was a great exercise in seeing what real community is. There were really just kind of a couple handfuls of us on that day, folks who I would consider elderly, all the way down to some really young kids, and they were all working equally hard. No one got paid. No one was asking for recognition. There were barely any Facebook posts about it, so no one's looking for, look at me, look what I did. They really just wanted to help their community. And, it was amazing. So I want to thank the city. Brianna, she organized it. It was flawless. It worked out great. All we had to do was just show up and we're dispatched. Steve was out there lifting heavy stuff and helping us get those trailers loaded up. At one point it was a nice day. It wasn't hot, but we were all sweaty, and we even had one gentleman, he had cuts on both his arms and his legs, bleeding, but he did not complain one time. And afterwards, First Baptist Church fed us. And again, it was really just, I walked away from that day feeling even more hopeful and excited about our city. We have encountered so much in the past couple months, but to see even just a small handful of folks get together was amazing. So again, thank you to Brianna and Steve for organizing that. Thank you, Mado. A few constituent issues. Steve, I forwarded it on to you. And I think, Mayor, you were included on the initial email. There was a request for road repairs on South Harvey in the Park Heights and Highway 270 area. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to look at that yet, but just know that's on the radar. There was a request earlier in the month at 433 University. And again, I want to thank Steve. He replied very quickly. That was an abatement property. And I'm not sure, are we the ones who, it was within a couple days, if not like the next day, the grass was cut. And I'm not sure if that was us or if that was the property owner. But the house was already, dilapidated. People were using the garage as, just going in there, no telling what they were doing. They were in there illegally. You could see it from my house. It was pretty bad. It's all gone. So was that a city effort, Steve? It was. So amazing. Great job. Thank you so much. That not only helps, you know, the people who live directly there, but again, I think it helps to beautify the city and that neighborhood as well, to help us have more pride in that area and not have those dilapidated homes, you know, attracting illegal activity. So amazing job. Great. Please forward that on to your team, that was amazing. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And then I know the police department is aware of this because it was on a Facebook posting, but we continue to have an issue with people breaking into vehicles. Apparently last night there was quite a few homes that were hit, and that was, it just kind of continues throughout the city. At first I just thought it was my neighborhood, but apparently it's happening all over the city. So if there's, I know the police department in their post said that, you know, they're hoping someone will come forward with some help, but, you know, just want to, again, keep this on the radar. It does seem to get more frequent and more sophisticated. So just, if we could just keep that on our radar and see what we can do about that. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Ward 2, John Kramer. All right. Ward 2, Eddie Foreman.
Can I legally speak since I'm not on the agenda?
Yeah, you're a council
Okay.
member. So
Well,
yeah.
I know I am today. I took the oath and I even remember it.
I
No,
have you written in right here,
Yeah.
Eddie Foreman. So
I
yeah,
I'm
you're legal.
just want to thank everybody in the city, especially for their ability to put up with the health issues I've had. Most of my earlier was because of my inability to get around on my own. But now that I've got a trustworthy cane and a brace on one leg, I can walk. So I'll be seeing everybody much more often. And that's all I've got. Just thank you.
Thank you and welcome back. Ward 3, Tim Poplin.
I just want to welcome Eddie, like you said. It's all pretty much been said. Appreciate you guys.
Ward 4, Chris Hansen.
I would just like to touch on the subject of the car break-ins. Chief, do you know if, because they broke a lot of windows last night also, this wasn't just their raiding through the cars, they were breaking windows. Were they only breaking windows of cars that looked like they had stuff in them, or were they just breaking windows period and raiding the cars? Do you know?
They're trying to break some windows. They're using like a BB gun, shooting up the window, things that they can see from the outside.
So really, about the only thing you do is make sure you don't leave any valuables, because that now they're going to get in there. They're getting really bold. They're going to get in there with whatever means they can.
Yes.
Okay. Did you guys happen to get any good leads on that? I hope maybe.
We have 2 leads. One of them got a real policy. We got one out.
Okay.
Dropped it out for us.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to talk a little bit about our city crews. I made a point this month to stop by and talk to some of the road crews and some of the water and sewer guys, and you know, it's hot out there, and they were out there. I mean, they were digging ditches, fixing water lines. One was replacing a sewer line, one crew. And I saw a couple of guys at the parts store when I was in looking for parts. They came in and had a nice conversation with them. I didn't hold them up too much, so they were anxious to go back to work. So, well, maybe not the ones in the air conditioning, but you know, I talked to them for a little bit and told them how much we appreciate them, because you know, you just can't say it enough. And I entered into the discussion about, you know, the different crews that do different things, but the theme I got from every one of them I talked about was, see this, City of Seminole, he said, we're all one. That's what Steve and Bryant and others have been talking about, and cross-training, and you know, getting these our employees to realize that, you know, cross-training is important. It makes you more valuable as an employee to be able to do different things. You know, if a downturn comes, hopefully it will never happen, those with the least skills are most likely the ones that are, going to get terminated, unfortunately. But every one of them pointed that out to me, that we do whatever, we're one team, and I think that's very important, and a change that has occurred, I think, for our crews. And as you add new employees, obviously it's up to the existing employees to let them understand, or to help them understand how important that is. And I just want to give kudos to our city employees that are out doing that hard work in all types of weather, but also to the leadership for helping them understand how important it is, and that they're buying into it, because it is true. And that's important, and that goes a long way to being able to have cross-training, and if you need people doing all on one job, they're willing to do it. And so, thank you for doing that, and thank you to our crews for buying into that, because that is very important. With that, we'll move on to reports from our city manager, Steve.
Well, I'll just echo what you're talking about, the cross-training. Bryant has done a fantastic job. His crews, just remarkable. I mean, what they've done. Bryant, how many people that don't work on a daily basis with water or wastewater now have licenses to do that work? I know we've had a whole bunch of people working on street crews and other crews that have gone through the schooling necessary to pull license to be able to work on water and wastewater. Any idea?
Everybody we have except for 2 now.
Only 2 are left that don't have license to work on other crews for water and wastewater. So that's just remarkable. I'm super proud of them. Great crew. With regard to the tornado recovery, we still have significant work to do. Bree and Sean have mapped most of the areas that have been left undone. The good news is that even though we've done our last citywide effort, we did get an extension as requested for the extension for the burn pile behind the county. And thanks again to our County Commissioner Tim Porter for making that available to us. We got a 60-day extension, so rather than August the 4th, we are now keeping it open till October the 4th, I believe. So people will still have a place to take their limbs and debris that is not oriented with construction. So we're talking strictly leaves, limbs, and tree trunks. So I just want to go back and talk a little bit more about the Mystery Theater. I think it's exceptional. It shows creativity by our staff to be able to dream up something like let's host something and bring in new actors. For the ladies, I would say I've heard a rumor that Jay Cox is going to be wearing really tight clothes, making his muscles obvious. So be sure and buy tickets early. School starts next week, so please pay attention in your school zones. I'm begging you. This is a really big deal every year. We don't want the police department to have to be involved, but we're going to be there with a presence to make sure that our kids are safe. I've been asked to bring updates on the swimming pool, and I did that last meeting. I know we had a lot absent, but we are still pursuing that. So the swimming pool is important to us, as is the family entertainment center that you guys instructed us to pursue. Today, about 3 o'clock, I got to see some of the final design plans on the family entertainment center. We have, back on the swimming pool, we originally had the site picked, we had the design selected. You all did that. And I think our estimate at the time was 2.7. That was pre-COVID. So we can assume that there's a little bit of inflation. So Right now, your staff is still working, trying to get those 2 projects to a launch pad and figure out how to bring it to you and how to pay for it. So that's kind of our challenge at this point. Just some things that you're probably going to hear or at least be requested to consider. I know that we've been requested from the Lions Club to change up the Snowman Wonderland a little bit this year and allow car traffic on the walking trail. Our staff doesn't consider that a viable option. Number one, it's only got 2 inches of asphalt on it. It was never designed to be traveled with automobiles, especially minivan or vans that are packed with people. I think you're still going to have walking traffic issues, pedestrians that are going to be involved in that. So I don't think that's a viable option. We didn't get him on the agenda, but Canadian Valley Fiber Optics, Brad has sent them, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, we sent them our rendition of the agreement. I think they've had their legal team on that. So hopefully, very soon, we'll have progress on fiber optics. I'm not at liberty to tell you anything about new things locating in Seminole with regard to this. I would just say that if you have a Facebook account, you might want to go to Hyson Classic Burgers of Yukon. So that's spelled HYNSON''S. So keep an eye out for that. I think we covered most of the trash service issues. I won't go into that very deep. The Seminole Urban Renewal Authority is still hard at work trying to develop a plan for the downtown recovery. As you're aware, there are 42 significantly damaged structures downtown. Many of those are going to have to be demolished, which leads to further, I'll call it snaggletooth appearance. I think the Urban Renewal Authority has a nice beginning of a plan, and they're working pretty hard at that, so we're anxious to see it. You're going to see some new lights, street lights downtown. I saw, I don't know, do we know how many? It had to have been 15 or 18 lamp poles that are going to be replaced basically along 2nd and Oak, down Oak Street, crossing Main Street. So that's going to look pretty cool. They are not, I don't believe, the same design that we have north and south on Main Street. These will be a little bit more pedestrian design. So this week we had the privilege, and we want to thank our school district for inviting us to participate in I don't think this was the name of the meeting, but this is the best way to convey it to you, is an active shooter meeting with our Seminole Public Schools. We had a great attendance from all law enforcement. We had a couple of our police department were there, light horsemen were there, the county commissioners or county sheriffs were there, had Oklahoma Highway Patrol, and we really walked through. All the principals were there. The administration had a really strong showing. It went extremely well. I learned a lot. I think our law enforcement learned a lot about what their plan, the school district's plan might be. I feel a lot better today than I did before. I think my takeaway from that is we need a little bit more equipment than what I had expected that we needed I like to put myself in the position of those that are taking action, whether it's a school teacher and something's going on in my class or in the hallway, or whether I'm an officer and I've got kids at home and you're asking me to walk into a spray of gunfire. What do I need to be comfortable in making that action? So we're going to work on that with our police department and make sure that these guys are ready to go when and if the time ever comes. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. City Attorney Brad Carter. Nothing? Okay. With that, we have executive session. Consideration and possible action to enter into executive session under Oklahoma Statute 25, Section 307.b.1, discussing the employment, hiring, appointment, promotion, demotion, disciplining, or resignation of any individual salaried public officer or employee. City Manager Steve Saxon.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed, like sign? All right.